Hello out there. Welcome to the Wake Up to the Bible. My name is Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan, and together we are going through the books of the Bible, Genesis through Deuteronomy, over the course of this year. We're reading a little bit every day. Today's is Genesis 37, 1 through 11, and I'm going to be reading from the Robert Alter translation, and then we will discuss what we've read afterwards. And Jacob dwelled in the land of his father's sojourning in the land of Canaan. This is the lineage of Jacob. Joseph, 17 years old, was tending the flock with his brothers, assisting the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, the wives of his father. And Joseph brought ill report of them to their father. And Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, for he was the child of his old age, and he made him an ornamental tunic. And his brothers saw it was he their father loved more than all his brothers, and they hated him, and could not speak a kind word to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and told it to his brothers, and they hated him all the more. And he said to them, Listen, pray to this dream that I dreamed. And look, we were binding sheaves in the field, and look, my sheaf arose, and actually stood up, and look, your sheaves drew round, and bowed to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule us? And they hate him all the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and he recounted it to his brothers. And he said, Look, I dreamed a dream again, and look, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing to me. And he recounted to his father and to his brothers, and his father rebuked him, and said to him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall we really come, I and your mother and your brothers, to bow before you to the ground? And his brothers were jealous of him, while his father kept the thing in mind. All right, so this is just the beginning of Joseph and his dreams. And whenever I hear about Joseph, I do think of the musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, because I'm a big musical fan. And I will be pointing out the differences between the musical and the actual story as we go through. It's actually fairly accurate overall. One of the first things that I will mention is the way that that show begins. Is they say in the land of Canaan, not long after the Bible began. And if you've been paying attention, there's actually a lot of the Bible before that, especially in terms of years. It's thousands. So
And,
it's a
and
lot.
speaking of the Bible before that, I'd like to go back to Genesis 32 for
Oh,
just,
look at that segue.
I just, I want to go back to Genesis 32, which wasn't long before that. But
Literally this time.
uh, I want to give you a little bit of Jewish culture that might also be a lesson. Um, when Jacob sends messengers out to Esau, he says something very matter of factly. I've dwelt with Laban. All right, yeah, well,
Hmm.
but the Jews make a big deal about it. There's a commentary by Rashi where he says, "Im Lavan harasha garti." I have dwelt with Laban the wicked. V'taryag mitzvot shamarti, and the 613 commandments I have kept. Lo lamarti mi ma'asav harayim, and I haven't learned from his bad deeds. Now, the reason that the Jews come up with this is because Garti, I have dwelt, is numerically equal to 613, with the acronym Taryag, 613. See what I'm saying? So they make a nice play on words. But so whenever a very religious Jew has to be around non-religious people, particularly if he has to spend a lot of time, let's say maybe he go visits his family and maybe they're very secular and he's very religious, he'll come back and he'll say Im Lavan Garti, you know, as if to say, all right, I live with these people, but I remained, religious. So I thought that might be interesting to you. Now, regarding Genesis 37,
Dun, dun, dun.
an error of translation has persisted for 4 centuries, and it's really amazing to me. The Bible clearly says if
Even
you
Robert Alter gets it wrong?
no, he gets it right, of course.
Oh.
No, the King James gets it wrong. No, I'm concerned right now with the King James because if you the Gideon
I was
Bible.
about to tear down my Robert
No,
Alter
I love
poster I
no
have
that
in my
whenever
room.
I go to I don't go to hotels all that much anymore.
Uh-huh.
I used to go a lot, but I always check for the Gideon Bible. By the way, that's not so much anymore. It shows the secularization of the country. So now hotels don't always have the Gideon Bible.
They
But
offer it, but hotels sometimes turn them
oh wow.
down.
Well, anyway, the Gideon Bible, of course, used classically the Old King James translation, and it's a very minor matter, you could say. It says in verse 37 that he brought a bad report of them to his father in the New King James, but Alter correctly says to their father. The Hebrew is to their father. Now, you would think that after all these years, that the old King James had made that mistake, the New King James would have corrected it, but for some reason it didn't. So I don't know why they didn't.
Mm.
But anyway,
Of course, the KJV only people will say it's some sort of inspired difference.
all right, well, maybe they had some alternate text in front of them.
Interesting.
But all right, anyway. Uh,
Fascinating.
uh, Other than that,
But I thought that the King James was just based on the Masoretic text.
yeah, that's what's interesting
Oh,
to me.
okay. All
I
right.
don't know the answer to the question.
Okay.
I'm putting it out there.
Sure. If you know why the King James
Well,
messed up,
this has gone on for four
put it
centuries.
down there.
You know, even the new. I thought the New King James had corrected it, but here it is,
Oh, wow.
incorrect in the New King James. Now,
Interesting.
another point I want to bring out, personal,
Okay.
that this passage, this section, is fun for me because when I used to teach biblical Hebrew, I used a text called Introduction to Hebrew by Moshe Greenberg, and he uses the Joseph account as his model. In other words, he teaches people OT Hebrew based on the passages, not Genesis 38, but 37, 39, 40.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so for the final exam, I would give them, this text without, and they would have to translate it for me as a final exam. And anyway, this is how
Well,
Tim.
if they had the Bible memorized, wouldn't that make it easy?
But this is how the great scholar Dr. Tim Finley got his start many years ago. If you remember, if you know who he is. All right. Anyway, there are translation issues, and I would like to ask my son what Robert Alter does with the Kotonet Pasim. What does he do with it? The tunic? Does he call it a?
Ornamented tunic.
Oh, okay. Coat of many colors is not you know some people make a big issue. It wasn't a coat of many colors. No, you can't say that. You could
Dolly Parton said that.
no no she
No, she
she
said
was
that it was a coat of many
she was in
colors.
favor of coat of many
Yes,
colors.
right.
Yeah,
It's a great
so
song too.
the Septuagint, as far as I know, has that translation. That's maybe one reason
Hmm.
why that the translators go with that.
Hmm.
But
I mean, an ornamented tunic is still potentially a coat of many colors.
and one possibility is a striped tunic,
Hmm.
and but there is another alternative,
Okay.
and Kyle and Dalich are very vehement on this,
Okay.
but Alter isn't, which is interesting,
Hmm.
and that is some people say it's a long coat that goes all the way maybe to the wrists and to the ankles,
Uh,
and so the length of the coat is the issue.
hmm.
So that's another translation, but that doesn't seem to be the more popular one.
Hmm.
And Alter doesn't go with it. He goes with
Ornamented
ornamented.
tunic.
Some people call it variegated, whatever that means.
Variegated usually means one color fades into the next.
Oh, I see. Okay.
My wife's a knitter, so she uses variegated yarn all the time. It's very
Okay.
beautiful.
So it
It's
goes one.
also sometimes like an ombre
So
effect.
there would be several colors there.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, variegated would imply one color going
Okay.
into
So
another
anyway,
color
that
through
translation
a
issue,
dyeing technique of some sort.
comes up. But if I'm
Regardless, it seems like conceptually we're all getting at the same thing, which is
right,
that this is a specific garment where they can wear and show favoritism because it is a
right,
more pricely thing.
right, right,
So, right.
right. Okay. And now, if
Do
Daniel
you
wants
want
to.
me to go? Yeah, one thing that's interesting that stands out to me is it starts out where it says Joseph is 17 years old. Usually you don't get that kind of detail. Usually you don't find out people's ages until they either have a kid or they die. So it's just kind of interesting that it gives you that information. And you don't know the ages of anybody else. You just know his age. So why exactly is something to ponder about. I don't have like a definitive answer why that is. Now, what's interesting is he says that he was tending the flock with his brothers, visiting the sons of Bilhan, the sons of Zilpha. So he was not with the sons of Leah, I guess, right? And it was those specific sons that he brought ill report of, I guess, which is, I don't know. That's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. And
Yeah.
by the way, maybe one reason for giving his young age is so a young person will identify with the account.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
from
no, it
from
gives
an
you a
author's point of view.
right. If you didn't know that, for all you know, he's like 35 or
Right,
something when
yeah,
this
but a
starts. Yeah.
teenager could
Hmm.
identify with this account.
Right. Um, but no, it's interesting because he brings it says that he brings him ill report, and then it just keeps going, and it says Jacob loved him more than anybody else, um, and it's kind of interesting. It doesn't really say what the father's reaction to the report is per se. It's just that the brothers don't like the fact that he's ratting them out, which
Yeah.
maybe isn't the best strategy either. I wouldn't say the account is particularly clear on that. I know some people make it out like it's bad to be a snitch or something, but I don't know. I don't know if you can really get that. I feel like it's neutral. It's not quite clear to me whether or not it was a bad thing that he was saying negative things about his brothers or not. Because imagine he's telling his father, "Wow, your sons are really conniving and a little bit violent or something." Perhaps he would have done something to discipline them, and they wouldn't have escalated to what they did later. I don't know. I'm just looking at it both ways. I don't know. Um,
Well, his dad may have placed him with them
hmm
to find out what's going on.
right. Now, it is interesting that Jacob does favor Joseph so obviously, considering he had the same problem from his father. And so it just goes to show that just because you see a negative example doesn't mean you don't pass it on to somebody else.
In
It's kind of
fact,
sad.
in fact, I think human experience is that negative examples are actually
Yeah,
copied.
it's true.
Because you unconsciously
Right.
copy your parents. You may not
Yeah,
even be aware.
right. It's one
You know,
reason why people that are like successful in business often have kids that are successful in business, and people that have difficulty making a go of good careers often have, you have cycles of poverty and cycle of success. And it's very sad because unfortunately you often learn the negative the negative behaviors, right? And then, it doesn't get any better. Um let's keep going.
you want to go to the dreams now, I
Yeah,
suppose.
let's get to the dreams. Well, one thing I will say is actually let's go before the dreams. So this is where it really starts escalating, is where it says they hated Joseph and they could not speak a kind word to him. To me, that's always the beginning of the not the end, but it's like this is not of there's a family example of that where you can't even speak to your siblings is a very, very dangerous place to be. It is. I mean, I understand people will sometimes have abusive situations and things like that, and so I can't say it's like a cut and dry thing, but like it just goes to show, if you can't even talk, if your communication is cut off, well, that's just the beginning of the end, right? Like it's already escalating. But anyway, he does show up to his brothers and he starts telling the dream. Now, the way that it's translated here where he says, "Listen, pray to this dream I dreamed." It does seem a little bit precocious. It seems like perhaps he is not being very wise in the way he is sharing this, and perhaps it is a little bit prideful. Perhaps I'm not sure. You could look at it that way,
He's either arrogant or very naive.
right?
It could be he was naive
Right. It's possible.
because he
On the other hand, the one reason why you might want to go the more prideful route is just because, considering what happens to him, it would seem very, very, very not measure for measure if he just was a naive person and all this terrible stuff happened to him and he had to get wise to the world versus maybe he was a little bit big for his britches and he had to be humbled a little bit.
could
So,
be.
I don't know. Um, Anyway, so you have the sheaves in the field. And what's interesting is that there's a couple differences between this and what we've had before. Before in dreams, it's always kind of God talking and he's saying, "This is what's going on," and he shows you imagery. This is not. There's no God talking, it's just imagery, right? And the other thing that's interesting is that unlike the dreams that are going to come later, the dreams here are immediately understood by everybody else. They're just so obvious. The brothers immediately clue into what the dream means, and they just don't like it. They have a correct interpretation. Later in the story, which we'll get to eventually, Pharaoh has a dream and he doesn't exactly understand. Whereas in this situation, they do understand, they just don't like the message.
This seems to be a test for the brothers.
Mm-hmm.
If God is involved in these dreams,
Right.
because these do come to pass.
Right.
Although it doesn't say that these dreams are of divine origin, but you would tend to think so based upon what finally happens. But if they were generated by his ego, that's you know, you could understand why the brothers would be resentful in that
Well, I
case.
don't
But
see how you could say they were generated by his ego, because how would he know that? Would he just, is he just, are you saying that somehow he made his own assumption and then it turned out it worked out? I mean, that's a pretty controversial take, I would
no, I'm
think.
saying that he dreamed about himself as lording over the brothers. That
Uh-huh.
could be a normal thing. I mean, it's not the best thing, but it
And
could.
his parents? Wow,
Well,
that's a really interesting
no,
take. I've never heard anybody think that perhaps this is self-generated, but it doesn't say it's not,
but
so you can't completely
all
rule
right,
it out.
right. But on the other hand, I do believe that this was God's influence here,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and because Jacob, took it into account, he
Mm-hmm.
got upset in one sense,
Right.
but maybe
It kind of reminds me of when Joseph and Mary, or no, Mary, I don't think Joseph, it says, right? Mary kept the things that Jesus said in her mind when he's all like, I have to be about my father's business and stuff. It's kind of a similar phrasing, right? That they're troubled by what the kid is doing in that moment, and then but what they're saying is resonated and they're thinking it through. I don't know. Do you understand what I'm getting
yeah,
at?
right
The
now.
parallel.
But it's interesting that the second time,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I don't know if the father, if he tells the father the first dream, but I mean,
Doesn't
I
specifically
guess
say
the
no.
brothers do.
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe.
well, let me see. Joseph dreamed the dream. He told it to his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So he told his brothers ahead of his dad, evidently.
Yeah.
But the second one, then he dreamed and told it to his brothers. But this time, oh, so he told it to his father and his brothers. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the second time his father's included, so he may not have been directly included the first time, but the second time, now I
Yeah.
guess it's a bigger deal because it
Right.
happened twice. So he tells his father. And
Now,
what's interesting, by the way,
okay.
to show it might be of divine origin, would be it's the parallel of Pharaoh had two dreams that really were the same message.
Right.
Remember, and so or not remember, yeah, you do
Mm-hmm.
remember, but it's also going to come up later.
Mm-hmm.
But
Although the dreams do change a little bit. One, it's just the brothers, and then the second one also has the sun and the moon, so it
yeah,
gets bigger.
yeah, right, yeah, the other
It's
one.
just maybe why I didn't tell the father the first one. He wasn't in the first dream.
There you go. Yeah, that's a
But
good
what's
point.
interesting is that his father says, "Shall we really come, I and your mother and your brothers?" Okay, here's the thing: his mother's not alive.
Right, some people do notice that
Mm-hmm.
as if he's saying this is absurd, but on the other hand, he may just be referring to either Leah or Bilhah.
It's possible,
Yeah,
right?
Bilhah may have.
Yeah, he could be referring to your mother now, the mother
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
family.
right, right.
Hmm. It's possible. Or he could be saying it's ridiculous because your mother's no longer alive, and so I'm going to disregard the message.
But he did. But you see, really, he doesn't
No,
disregard it
not completely.
because he kept the matter in
Yes,
mind.
right.
Yeah,
Now, in terms of a modern way that I like to think about this, in terms of applicability, is one thing I think we do have to be careful about is what we share with others, especially people that are antagonistic towards
of
ourselves.
course, of
Well,
course.
I just know that so many people like to go out there and they're like, I am a CHRISTINN. I have, and sometimes that's not the right attitude to have.
A fool speaks all his mind. The proverb tells us.
Yeah. But sometimes going out there and being like, you know what? I'm going to live forever because I'm on God's side and everything. Sometimes that really isn't the right way to handle things.
No,
You do
well,
just
that's
bring about persecution to yourself,
right.
and that's not exactly the right way to be. And I'm not saying that you should deny Jesus or something like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about how explicitly obnoxious you get about sharing all of God's promises and blessings he has in store for you versus other people that are not you. I think sometimes we do need to be
Well,
careful.
that's kind of silly when you think about the martyrdom that many have to face too. Think about what Paul had to face. He was
Hmm.
practically, he goes through it in 2 Corinthians
Well,
11.
no, I'm not
So
saying.
would he have made a comment like that?
Well,
No,
I mean, he
he
could
would have
have.
he
He could have in an eternal way. I mean, that's what everybody
right,
says.
right,
Nobody's trying to claim otherwise. I mean, some
right.
prosperity preachers or something.
Some do.
But yes, I'm not even talking about prosperity gospel. I'm talking
Okay,
about the people that are like, I've read the end of the book and we win. That's a great message, and I'm not saying never say it, but some situations does not merit
of
that because
course,
if you're just going to make people hate you,
right.
I don't know. I think you've got to be careful. I don't think you always are required. I think what this shows us is we're not always required to give other people all of the message that God has given us.
Jesus tells us to be wise as serpents.
Right.
harmless as doves.
Right.
Now, there are practical lessons in these accounts.
Right.
One was what my son was pointing out.
Hmm.
You don't have to just spew out everything, and especially consider your audience, consider how
Right.
they're going to take it.
Right. That's the specific thing because his father was antagonistic, but he had the maturity to that it wasn't going to just completely fester. So there's a certain amount of people that you can tell that maybe still will be antagonistic, but you're going to plant a seed. But there's other people that you might tell, and they're just going to come after you, and you've unfortunately kind of brought it on yourself a little bit.
And then the other point is not to outwardly favor children. You
Yes.
should be fair with your children.
Yes.
You shouldn't have an obvious favorite child.
Right.
I had four, so I can speak from experience. It's not. I
And
mean,
I can speak from experience that he followed that example.
oh, good. I'm happy to hear that.
Um, but the thing about
And
and I'm gonna try to do the same with my two sons. It was actually something that I was consciously thinking about when because I just have a newborn, and I've had such a relationship with my first. It's like I'm gonna have to make sure that I don't go down some weird path and do that too, just because I've had more time with the other. You know, um, because it is a concern of mine, right? Now, I believe isn't it the Talmud that particularly talks to this from this account as well? Because I thought I was reading something, and they said that on account of a coat, it ended up escalating, and we basically ended up in exile. So therefore, don't show favoritism. Like they
oh,
basically put it as like the beginning of a very slippery slope
wow,
that led them to slavery. But
wow.
essentially, you can draw that line, and so yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Now,
And we ultimately know God doesn't show favoritism, so let's model that too.
now, as we read the account of Joseph over the next period of time,
Yep.
you'll see that in many ways he's a type of Christ,
Hmm.
and you'll see it more and more as we go through this.
Hmm.
And
That's one reason why I like that parallel with him keeping the things in his mind. I thought that was cool.
now, I was talking about the importance of Shechem.
Yep.
Here we go again in verse 12 of the next reading.
Ooh,
They're
well,
going
that's a little cliffhanger. We're going to
yeah,
talk about that tomorrow. So,
right.
if you haven't, yes, please like, ring the bell, subscribe, call your friends, send out coats, whatever it is you need to do. And we will see you tomorrow.